Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Product Coalition European Tour podcast. I'm in the bonus tour city of Cardiff today, where I'm very excited to be joined by Peter Sueref. Peter, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Looking
forward to chatting through today's topic, which is building data products inside a large corporate machine like Centrica.
Yeah, Centrica are a very big company, 30,000 employees, and somehow I still manage to just about get data products out now and again.
Good. I'm sure there's plenty of learnings we could all learn from that. I'm looking forward to going through that. But first, I need to give some thank yous. First up, a big thank you to dopol.co for the introductions to all the guests here in Cardiff. Dopol is a global online survey provider that has recently switched to a pay-for-value model, meaning you can get started with their real-time multilingual and embeddable surveys for free today. Just go to dopol.co. That's DOOPOLL.co. Now, this tour and every single podcast episode is dedicated to raising awareness and support for the bushfire-affected communities and wildlife in Australia. If you do enjoy this episode or any of the episodes on the Product Coalition European Tour, consider showing your support at bushfire.productcoalition.com to support either the volunteer firefighters, the wildlife, or the communities of Australia. As I say, I'm interviewing 50 product leaders across 5 European cities, and I'm going to gain insights, knowledge and experience to share with you, the Product Coalition global community. If you've just joined us, welcome. We're a community of over 500,000 readers, 6,000 Slack members and thousands of podcast listeners. Now, before we get stuck into the episode, I also need to give a thanks to some brands and individuals that have made significant contributions to the tour fundraiser for those Australian communities, wildlife and volunteer firefighters. First up is UserPilot, which is a code-free user onboarding and adoption tool designed especially for product management teams. UserPilot helps to increase conversion, user retention rates and reduce churn by guiding new users to their first aha moment with interactive walkthroughs, contextual product tours and onboarding checklists. It allows product managers to build fully customizable, behavior-triggered in-app experiences with a simple visual editor. Go to userpilot.com to book your demo and get a free trial. Shobit Chug is an intentional product manager. Shobit is a Google product manager, and he helps product managers become product leaders and have careers they can be proud of. Go to www.intentionalproductmanager.com to sign up for Shobit's free class on the habits that turns product managers into exceptional product leaders and help them move through their careers fast. Product-led teams like Mixpanel and Flexport know that the best time to capture engagement is when a user is already inside the product. That's why they use Chameleon to drive feature adoption, build onboarding flows, and gather user feedback. You can give it a go at trychameleon.com/success. I'd also like to thank Rich Mironoff and Chris Miles as individual donors to the fundraiser as well. Right, Peter, let's get going.
Let's do it.
Before we get into the world of building data products inside corporate machines, specifically large corporate machines, we've got the icebreaker. So in the Melbourne series, it was a bit of a locals guide to Melbourne with the guests. In Sydney, it was a pub quiz. So for Cardiff and all the different cities that I'm visiting, I've gone a bit more local. So the icebreaker game today is it Welsh or not?
Oh God! Okay, let's do it.
Can I ask, are you Welsh born and bred?
I'm born in Wales.
Right.
I've got Greek parentage and Greek history. So my children speak Welsh.
Wow,
I don't
okay.
speak Welsh, so this could be interesting.
Right,
okay. I don't expect to do very well.
All right. Okay. Well, first up, I've got a couple of products. So the first product, this could be controversial, could create quite a bit of a storm on social media.
Okay.
Guinness, Welsh or not?
So there's something in my brain which says actually the guy that maybe came up with Guinness originally was a Welshman. I've kind of got this bit of latent knowledge, I think. So I'm going to go there's some Welsh history there with Guinness.
That must have stemmed from like some Welsh folklore or something that's been trending from pub to pub across the valleys.
Out my misery. Is it?
So my friend, the internet, says that you may think it's an Irish institution, but legend has it that the recipe was allegedly bought by Mr. Arthur Guinness from a tavern keeper in Holyhead, North Wales, whilst he was waiting for a ferry and taken over the sea to Ireland, where it became this iconic symbol it is today.
Well, there we go. That's amazing. And the related link to data science, which I'll talk about, is the guy that invented the t-test, this famous statistical test, worked for Guinness. and he was the kind of in-house statistician that used to figure out whether Guinness met its quality control or not. So if you go to the Guinness factory in Dublin, there's a little plaque on the wall that everybody ignores, and it says students' tea test was created here. So it's a little bit of stats folklore for you as well, related to Guinness.
Right, I'll tell you what, when I do a Dublin tour,
get on it.
I'm going to get to that plaque and tag you on LinkedIn. I'm going to take
Definitely
a picture of me on that
do
plaque and find it. Brilliant. See, look, how much value have we already created in this episode? This is brilliant. All right, then the next one, next product. And I'll tell you what, it could be controversial as well, but I'll get going with it. The refrigerator.
The refrigerator? No, I've not heard anything related to Wales there. So no, that's a complete mystery to me. I'd be really interested to hear
Where do you think it's from?
I mean, I was going to say Scotland because they invent lots of things, but it's already really cold there, so they probably didn't have much need for it. Maybe a southern country.
Right.
Yeah, maybe somewhere southern Europe-ish.
You'd be right with Scotland.
Okay, well, yeah, they invented a lot of stuff.
Scotsman William Cullen is the man we have to thank for the invention of the refrigerator. Cullen demonstrated his discovery at Glasgow University in 1748. Though at the time, no effort was made to commercialise the invention. Now, the reason I say it's controversial is, from my memory, I'm sure we had the refrigerator in the London podcast series.
Oh, right, okay.
I just can't remember if it was attributed, maybe it was like attributed to a British invention.
Yeah, that tends to happen if you're in Wales or Scotland.
Yeah.
If they do well, then they are British, but if they do poorly, then it's Andy Murray Scotsman or Gareth Bale Welshman or something. So, yeah. Very
true, very true. All right, next up. Yeah, your kids are going to love this one. We've got a bit of a Welsh linguistic quiz going on for you. Okay. All right. So the quiz is you got to decide whether the word that I'm saying, whether it's Welsh or whether I just made it up this morning.
I'm going to get thrown out of Wales after the end of this. Why are you doing this to me?
All right. Okay. First one is man a monkey. I don't know why I did it in a Geordie accent. Man a monkey.
That can't be a real word. No, I'm going to go with you made that up. You made that up.
Man a monkey is might as well in Welsh.
Might as well, man a monkey.
That's it.
Didn't learn that in Welsh lessons.
Throw that into a sentence this afternoon at work.
Okay.
Right, okay, next one. Is it Welsh or did I make it up? Egam.
I think your pronunciation is probably not there with some of these.
the Cockney Australian twang isn't helping. Egam.
I'm going to go with that's a real Welsh thing. Yeah.
What do you think it means?
I don't know. Maybe it means that. I don't know. I've got no idea.
I don't know. Egam. So if you have had a few Guinness and you're walking home and you're swaying a bit, you're egam.
Oh, really?
Not going in a straight line.
Oh, I can use that one.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
You could use it when talking about trend lines, not going in a straight line or something like that. Throw it into conversation. That's all for the Welsh test. So you'd actually got...
oh, thank God.
Well, I think 2 out of 4 there. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. That's. I'll take that. I'll take that.
Good going. Do need some Welsh linguistic classes, but
yeah.
All good. All right, let's get stuck into it. Building data products inside a large corporate machine. Now, before we jump into that, do you mind sharing with the audience a bit of your career background and history and your context?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked for Centrica, which are the kind of owners of British Gas, and one of the largest energy companies in the UK, for my entire career. So I graduated 2002 computer science, then went straight into a kind of development role where I was writing code day to day. And then I moved slowly more into the data world, and I looked at things like data architecture and data platforms. Then latterly, maybe the last 8 to 10 years, it's been kind of big data as that arrived, the early 2010s, and then into data science. So where I run the first data science team in Centrica. My career. So I've been a computer science graduate. I'm kind of doing a part-time PhD in computer science as well. I've been on the review for digital innovation in Wales. I'm on the advisory board of a few bodies around kind of education in Wales, particularly relating to STEM and data science and technology. So that's really the area that I'm interested in. One of the things I've been a big advocate for in Centrica is innovation, and in particular kind of technological innovation related to AI and data science, and how do we launch some of these kind of interesting things that we're doing? Can we get them kind of out into the world a little more rather than just keeping them from within our own confines? So that's the thing I think we might find interesting talking about today, because it's not always an easy path.
No. And I can imagine that the fuel you need for data products is data, and Centrica must have an enormous amount of data.
Yeah. So actually our kind of jump into big data was as a result of smart metering. So in the UK, we've now kind of adopted smart metering fairly widely, and we've got a mandate from the government to get pretty much every property on a smart meter in the next couple of years. That meant that you're going from a kind of meter reading where you give a meter read 4 times a year, maybe twice a year, maybe once a year, to getting a reading every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes. So the amount of data suddenly overnight just absolutely exponentially explodes. So at that point you think, okay, we need to do something differently. We can't just have our kind of old existing data warehouses. We need a big data platform. So that's the kind of initial growth. And then after that, I think it's arguable, but I think every big company is a data company, really. Our data is our most important asset. That's the thing that you're leveraging to understand your customers better, where your future product direction is, how you market to customers, how you understand the rest of the world and market trends. So yeah, we've got a ton of data that we're probably still figuring out how to best leverage all of that.
Right, awesome. And it's interesting to hear how the dependency on accurate data goes all the way back to the home with this smart meter implementation and the change there. Yeah. I do know a story that my granddad was a bit of a ducker and diver in his day,
right,
and tried to bypass the meter of his home.
It's very common still.
Right? And he actually blew himself up and shot across the driveway of the front of the house. Yeah. He was fine about it, lived to tell the story, but I don't think he tried it again after that.
Probably sensible not to do that, yeah. And we have ways and means of finding out when that happens now, using data actually.
Right.
Some really interesting algorithms where you can kind of detect
fraud, essentially.
Detect energy fraud, energy theft. Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit around, you've got massive amounts of data. And I know from being in organizations that do have big data that it can almost be overwhelming. Where to start. It's just where do you start with it? I mean, how do you create real value that can mean something to revenue growth, for instance, or whatever the strategic direction is? Could you talk to me a little bit around what practices and mechanisms you've learned from that haven't worked and that you've come across that is really working for you and the team at Centrica? Yeah,
sure. So we discovered exactly the same thing really early, actually. We've got this big data platform. We've thrown all of our data into basically a huge Hadoop cluster. And then what the hell do you do with it? How do you make sense of it? So historically, you kind of architect your data from the ground up, right? You've kind of got these multiple layers where you surface all your data into these lovely, clean, or supposedly clean tables, dimensions, and facts, and so on. And then your analysts can go and do things with them. And that world, I think, has pretty much gone, or at least changed significantly. So we actually took the unusual step of trying to build something ourselves to figure this stuff out. So we had a kind of ongoing project called Project George, which was named after one of our data architects that used to talk about this stuff a lot, to try and figure out how do you best kind of make sense of the data that you've got in there. So this project was aimed at, can we create a kind of metadata repository so we can understand the definitions of our data, and also use an algorithm to basically find links, find joins in the data, so you can do something with it and understand, the interrelationships. That then became something that we kind of packaged up and then gave to the rest of the organization. And we thought, actually, this is pretty useful. Why don't we go and do something with this? This became our first kind of external product. So we actually launched a product called IoTahoe, which is a part of the Centrica umbrella now, under the Centrica umbrella. And that's a data company. So Centrica, this energy company, increasingly going into services, we actually offer data as a service. So we've got this data company. And this project IoTahoe was literally something that we thought, can we make sense of our own data with this? Because how do you actually kind of understand what you've got sitting underneath the surface.
Right. Going through that process, how did you find solving that problem for you internally versus creating it into a product that served a purpose or as a solution for other companies that you could then sell?
Entirely different.
Right.
Like they were entirely different things. So, the amount of work it takes to get something built internally, I think it's significant, but it's different type of work to getting something launched externally.
Right.
So where we were building, you still write the code, you still work in the same kind of method in terms of, you've got a bunch of sprints, you've got a product owner, you've got this kind of end deliverable. But when you launch externally, then suddenly you have to talk with commercial teams and with legal and with regs and with marketing and get kind of financial approval at board level. And it becomes a whole different board game. And inside a big organization, we're designed to do a couple of things, which is let's do energy, let's do services for kind of customers, us residential customers and business customers. We are not designed to sell software. Nothing about our organization is set up to say, oh, this is how you go and manage a software product and this is how you go and sell software. So actually pitching that was quite a difficult thing. So we had to internally pitch that. Very similar to how I imagine you'd have to go and pitch to a VC fund to get some initial investment money. So we've got this product that we've built. We're using it internally. It's getting some traction, and then suddenly we have to go and figure out, okay, can we just pick this up and drop this in another organization? How does this work exactly? So there were pitches to various kinds of investment boards, internal investment boards, lots of conversations, high level at the boardroom that I've not been invited back to since because, I don't need to go there, and I'm quite happy not to go there generally in such a big organization. But I think the great thing was actually Centrica kind of really understood the value of data and they invested in it. And then, they went and actually made this happen. They went and launched this data company. Right. And we've got a few other similar organizations in Centrica. So we've got a product called Hive, which is the Hive active heating product. So manages your heating and, like a kind of remote control on your phone. So you can go and kind of orchestrate your house basically, kind of own the home. We've got a company called Local Heroes, which is kind of like Uber for field engineers. Right. So we really appreciate the value of data, and actually data and services are probably the thing that's going to be the kind of main selling point, I think, over the next 10, 20 years, particularly as kind of decarbonisation becomes a much bigger force as well.
Productizing any data set that belongs typically internally to an organisation, I can imagine you come up with a lot of conflict around how we use that data. You're obviously in a regulated industry as well. Yeah. How did that impact, again, how you brought this data product or data service to market, knowing that you still need to protect the data that's yours or your customers? Yeah,
no, absolutely. That's absolutely critical. So we have GDPR in the UK, which is... it really emphasizes that we have to protect and respect customers' data, and they own the data. The other thing that we've done, actually, which I launched a couple of years ago, is an ethics board, an internal ethics board for data science. So I work in data science, and one of the things that we do is build algorithms to do all sorts of things with, potentially customer data or, technological data or, whatever data it might be. So we have to go through our own ethics board to get approval to go and launch something. So we're very firm on the fact that actually we have to pass not just the kind of legal and reg side of things, but is this the right thing to do with customer data?
Right. Okay.
We need to make sure that's kind of not just legal, but actually ethical and moral. Right. In terms of how we approach it. In terms of the data product, the product that we built was really a kind of metadata management tool. So it's almost data agnostic. Right. You can kind of put any data in there and it doesn't really care what you do. It's just going to find links and joins in it. And it's really up to then the next layer up of how you go and use that data that would have the impact, in terms of GDPR or legal or regulatory impact. Right.
You mentioned at the start, this was a proprietary product that you built yourself. As a data leader, the choice with any type of product is obviously build, borrow, buy. What were some of the trade-offs that stood out to you as to why building it yourself made more sense than all of the tools and technologies and vendor solutions that are out there?
So there is still probably a debate inside Centrica around exactly around this, and going back at that time, it was not clear cut which one to do. I think at the time the market was very immature in terms of big data. So if we go back to kind of 2012, 2013, there were vendors, but there were no vendors that were doing the exact kind of mix of what we were looking at. Or if there were, then maybe they didn't fit with our existing architecture. So we thought, actually, our core competency is energy. That's the thing that we know how to do well, and we'd always go and build probably first if we're going to go and do something energy related. But increasingly, we were seeing that our core competency needs to be data as well. We need to really get a fundamental understanding of how to use this data. So I think because of this mix of data becoming more important and more vital as an asset, and the fact that there weren't really mature vendor solutions out there were some open source pieces, but nothing really that kind of hit the mark. We made the kind of decision, let's go and do it. It was kind of a decision within IT first, then we kind of pitched up and sold that to everybody else. But, it went down well enough that we managed to get further funding and investment, and then eventually launched this separate little startup out to the back of it. But I think that's always the discussion point inside a big organization. Do you build? Do you buy? Do you do something different? I think we got lucky with that one as well. Probably is you're always taking a gamble with these things, right? You never quite know how they're going to pan out. But that one, and it improved us as an organization as well. Actually, the process of going through it, I think you become more mature in terms of you understand what is needed to go and launch something out in the world at that point.
Right, okay. You've made it sound very simple. Designing,
God no.
Designing, ideating, I imagine iterating to bring this new product or service to market. But I know, and I'm sure many people listening know as well, firsthand, that it takes a particular type of culture for that to happen successfully within a reasonable amount of time as well.
Yes.
Could you talk to me about what is that culture that's enabled that success to happen?
Well, the Centrica is a 100-year-old company, or British Gas at least. You can kind of trace its lineage back over 100 years. So it's a very big, old, traditional company. It's not historically been particularly fast moving. I think up until we launched this product, we'd had one patent application in the last 100 years, and then with this product, I think we wrote another 10 that are all currently being, argued about and hopefully will be passed. So we I think had to get involved in culture change, culture transformation as a big part of delivering this. And again, that's still ongoing, that never ends. And because it's such a big organization, actually you kind of target different parts of the org before, rather than the whole thing. So, for us, I think we did a few things, and we're still doing a few things quite well, and other things we probably could do better. One of the things we do is we show our working a lot. So we constantly do show and tells. Every month we're going to do a show and tell of what we built, what kind of interesting new data science pieces out there. We also, I try and emphasize, let's show things that don't work as well as the things that work. Let's show some failures. Let's show that actually we are in a bit of a guessing game. We're exploring this stuff. It doesn't always take off. That's been, I think, fundamental in getting buy-in, particularly from kind of senior leadership as well, because, that starts to spread and it starts to build up a bit of a kind of wellspring of interest. So doing that has been great. My team, bless them, are brilliant, and they do things like they'll run workshops, they bring your own data days. So, come with your business problem, bring some data, and we'll go and show you how to code an algorithm in R or Python or something. And that's been something that they've launched independently as well, which has been, really, really good. These kinds of, they sound like little things, but actually I think they are more impactful than some of the big kind of corporate campaigns, because they come from the actual people delivering the work, and they're aimed at the people that going to kind of get involved in the work, hopefully. So I think from the ground up, certainly we've done a really kind of a good job. Where maybe it's difficult sometimes is to start from the top down and to get a kind of cultural change from the top down. Because you need to have leaders that have, I guess, the same desire to do that as you. And if you don't have them, then it's kind of difficult to change that. Luckily, in Centrica, we've had a few people that have really kind of believed in data in transforming the organization, in innovation. So over the past 5 or 6 years, we set up a whole part of the organization called Centric Innovations, which is kind of an internal VC fund to do things like this, invest in potentially external startups, but actually also invest in internal startups as well. So innovation competitions and, all these great things that you see companies doing. We've been lucky enough to have that as well, which has been really helpful.
Right. Can I ask, with a company this big and with funds dedicated to internal and acquiring external ventures, are you almost too big to fail? When there are failures, what happens with that? Is it well received? Because it's a public company.
It's a FTSE 100 company. Yeah. So that's a really good question. We haven't had a big failure yet, I guess. It's fair to say we probably will at some point. I know, some of the startup bets that we've made maybe haven't paid off, but, that's the nature of the business, I guess. Yeah, small bets, yeah. I guess I can talk about some of the smaller pieces that we've done. So with my department, with data science, we're trying to launch little products first that maybe might turn into something bigger. And some of those take off, some of those don't. What we tend to find is that actually we find lots of interest from our business users to, can you go and explore this for me? Can you go and build something for me? And then when it comes time to productionize it, actually we haven't really got the money right now. We might get budget next year, maybe come and talk to us then. And, that's kind of work that's been wasted or work that's been lost. Okay. And that happens fairly frequently. That's not an uncommon occurrence. That's kind of a source of frustration for me, for my team. But understandable, I think, because until you see some of the output from these things, particularly, if we're talking about kind of AI and machine learning, then you need to build up a lot of data. You need to get some historical data in there and start to kind of get the training improved and then the outcome improved. It's understandable that the business are going to be slightly wary of that. So we tend to see lots of those kind of peter out before they reach fruition. But at that point, we haven't spent huge amounts of money. That's been kind of almost R&D money, exploratory money, because a lot of this is by nature R&D. What would happen if a big part failed? I don't know. I guess you'd probably see in our share price. That would probably be fairly impactful. I don't think Centric are too big to fail, though. I don't think we've got the luxury of being a bank or a big insurance company. Right.
Keeps
who knows
you
what the future holds? Yes, exactly. It keeps you kind of honest, I think.
You mentioned there about receiving inquiries from around the business, small pieces of work, and I know data teams by nature are very hypothesis led. How do you go about prioritizing what are the good hypotheses that are well rationalized versus what's just an idea and someone's just got a question for nothing more than them personally? How do you make that sort of almost product management prioritization decision around where you invest time on those early hypotheses?
We talk about this a lot. This again is something that my leadership team talk about in team meetings. How do we prioritize the work? Because it's really interesting. It's really difficult to figure out which is going to land and which isn't. And actually, I think there are probably two ways that I've started to do it almost subconsciously in my head. One is, have we got a kind of really passionate product owner on the other side that really cares about it and you can tell they're invested in it and they want to do something? So the question might not be great, but if the person is enthusiastic and you can see they kind of want to see this thing through, then that's a real kind of green flag for me. So red flag if they kind of, turn up and, I've heard about data science, we might want to do this with you. What do you think? Then I'm probably not going to be as keen. The other kind of question, I think I saw this somewhere on Twitter, I'll try and credit it at some point if I can, but somebody said you should have, if you start a data science problem, what is the thing you'll change in the business as a result of this? That should be your first question. And if they can answer that question, then that's also another green flag. Uh-huh. So if you know that I'm going to, we'll build this algorithm for you, and then you will change the way you handle customer calls in this way, or you will create a new process to do this, or you will do something, then that's great, because you know it's going to be impactful, rather than, again, can you explore this data and tell us what it means? That doesn't tend to give good outcomes, or not impactful outcomes anyway. Right. It might be the start of something, and we still do some of those projects, but you're not quite sure.
Could you talk to me, let's go into the world of data science a little bit deeper now. I'm getting out of my own depth.
No, sure.
So how do you go about iterating on an algorithm in an efficient way?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, sometimes it happens like that, but most often we've had an example where we've built a product for our HR team, which we're trying to productize at the moment, and without kind of going into the detail about the product is about, we've actually found that we've tried to improve this product, not by kind of iterating on the existing algorithm, but by adding more and different algorithms to do it. So we're trying to kind of figure out a certain thing, and we use a particular method to do that, and then we augment that with other methods as well on top of it. So we keep adding and adding and adding, and actually that we found is the best way of bringing the accuracy up. It really depends on the domain that you're involved in as well. So if you're involved in an area where you're trying to maybe classify something and you've got very few cases that are positive, then it becomes quite difficult to do, and you need to find more and different ways of doing it. Whereas if you've got a fairly balanced data set where you're kind of classifying things into almost kind of two equal camps, then actually, you can kind of fight it out and you can improve the algorithm consistently, or maybe try different algorithms that might change over time. One of the standard things you do is you have a champion challenger. So every period, whether that's a month or a quarter or a year, then you'll update your algorithm with new training data, and maybe you'd change you tune it, you change the parameters, or look at different algorithms. So you're constantly looking at, because the world isn't static, the world keeps changing. So it's not a single answer for that, I guess. There's lots of different ways depending on the domain that you're involved in.
Okay. A lot of the data science hypothesis, when I've been fortunate to work with data scientists, it's been very exploratory a lot of the time. So for me, it's a bit like prospecting for gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you time box that with your team? How do you make sure you're not just prospecting everywhere forever?
Yes.
And put a limit on things?
Well, so lots of the data scientists we have come from academia, where the time scales are different. They've just come out of PhDs that lasted kind of 3 to 5 years, and then suddenly they're in a commercial environment where we've got 3 to 5 weeks to do something quickly, and that takes a bit of a mind shift. So the things we tend to do, we'll use kind of agile methods. So I think we use agile pretty much across the board. Use some Kanban somewhere. But this, I guess, focuses you on having outputs on a regular basis. And then we've got product owner attached to pretty much every single project. And it's the product owner that gets to call the shots around, does this look like it's going anywhere? Are we leading to any output? So I think having the combination of an external person, exchanging a PhD supervisor for a product owner, I guess in some ways, but it kind of works. Having this external person, having these very short time boxed activities of kind of 1 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks in some cases, that tends to focus on the kind of output. There probably isn't a hard and fast rule about when to kill a project, though, and we're probably not very good at killing projects, I would say. I'd like to see a few more kind of killed in their very early infancy if it doesn't look like they're going anywhere. Saying that, some projects tend to bear fruit much later on, and one of the things that we do is give our people some free time to work on things they think are interesting. So we've got a few projects that are ongoing. They're kind of like, it's almost like the Google time thing, where I think they give 20% time. We give some time, kind of like half a day, to go and work on, I think this social network problem is really interesting, but nobody wants to fund it. So I'm going to go and have a look, and then maybe if it turns into something, we can go and launch it. Or somebody else built this really great kind of computer vision piece to go and look at solar panels on Google Maps, to go and figure out where are all the solar panels in the UK. So, because there is no central register of solar panels, it's independent companies that go and pick these things. So how do you figure out where solar is? So there wasn't really a project. There were a few people interested in it, or would have been interested if they had that. So this was a spare time project. Let's go and build a deep learning model to go and figure out solar panels. So things like that tend to be interesting, and then hopefully they become useful as genuine kind of, things that provide some value.
Awesome. I mean, big data typically for me assumes you have all the data. Is that true?
No, God no. So I mean, again, it depends on the domain you're talking about. So we've got I mean, let's talk about customer data. This isn't something we do, and I haven't explored the GDPR implications or anything. So this is purely hypothetical. Before anybody wants to sue me, but say we've got tens of thousands of calls coming in every single day. So potentially that's an awful lot of voice data that we've got in. We could potentially do something like turn that voice to text, or do something like your kind of sentiment analysis based on the tone of voice and the timbre and the loudness and all these other features. So technically the data's there, but actually to go and mine that data, you need to go and build this whole pipeline, this whole process behind it, which is going to be expensive and time. It'll take a lot of time. It'll take a lot of resource. There needs to be demand. And what are we going to get at the end of it? Do we know it's going to provide value? So again, you're always making bets on these things. It's never quite clear cut where you're going to get the value. I mean, something like that. No doubt Google and other big organizations are thinking about how to do that. Microsoft, how do you build a pipeline to go and do that automatically? So it's not something we'd go and build ourselves, because again, it's not our core competency. But that data is technically there, right? So we could go and use it, but yeah,
whether you should,
whether we should, and whether we want to invest the time and money.
Does strategy set those guide rails quite strongly for you from an innovation perspective? Of guys, don't go into this space and don't go to that space, or is that down to your own sort of decisions?
We've got kind of various strategies. We've got a data strategy. We've got an overall organizational strategy, and that, as you can imagine, that tends to fit into, if it's your core competency, then kind of go and do something there, go and build. Right. If it's not, then we'll buy something. We'll go and fit it in, and that usually has to have some kind of ownership from the wider business.
Right.
But in terms of, if we're looking at algorithms, if we're exploring something, then actually no, it's very loose. That we have a kind of a very research focused team that are able to go and explore some of these things and understand the value of them, and then pitch back up to strategy and architecture and say, do you know what, we've explored this. This might be a good thing for us to think about more widely. So it tends to be a kind of a good kind of mutually beneficial relationship, I think.
Right. Okay. The number of PhD grads coming out now with data science listed to the name is awesome, and obviously the salaries associated with that makes it very attractive for people going from masters up into PhD in data science. But for those that have, not like yourself, that's doing a PhD alongside career, but that have taken a purely academic start, so I've gone from an undergraduate to a master's to PhD, and then come into a commercial environment. What are some of the common things that they do that you'd recommend don't do, or that could make things easier for them when working with product teams after coming out of an academic environment?
So I think the thing that shocks most of the kind of new starters from academia is you're in a commercial environment now. There's a focus on where's the money at the end of this? Your time costs money, and the output from your project needs to have a financial value attached to it. And that it sounds fairly obvious to someone who's been working in a commercial environment for 20 years, but for some of our new starters, then that maybe sometimes gets lost. And I think having an appreciation of how a business works is probably a really important thing, because it's completely different to academia. There are completely different goals and approaches, maybe less so now in the UK, actually. I think as we're talking, academics are currently on strike, actually, because of a few of these issues, and that they maybe are becoming more commercial. But it's the whole framing for the project you're doing is different, and understanding a commercial environment, I think, is critical. There's also probably a little bit around kind of standing on your own 2 feet a bit more. So in a PhD, you have to do that. You have to do independent research, but at the same time, you've got a supervisor there that's kind of giving you advice, and you've got your kind of academic peers and colleagues. And to some degree, you kind of fall off a cliff when you first join a big organization. You've got colleagues and you've got a boss, but you're also expected to be very independent. And if you're a data scientist, well, there are certain expectations of you. You need to be able to go and do independent, high quality work that has some kind of outcome in the organization, a commercial outcome. So I think that this kind of focus more on the commercial side and focus on your kind of own independence is probably critical. And the final thing, actually, this is probably the most important thing, being able to express yourself and explain your ideas really clearly in a commercial environment, which is really different to an academic environment. Again, if you're talking to senior leaders, you don't want to talk to them about hyperparameter tuning or distributions. You need to talk to them about, again, what's it mean in terms of the commercial value, and explain things in clear language.
Right.
That's absolutely critical. It's probably my first one, actually.
Yeah.
I should have said that right at the beginning.
Yeah. Awesome. And for PhD grads, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. For them coming in and working in that environment, is peer review of what they're trying to operationalize still critical, like it is in the academic world?
Yes. So we do peer review.
Right, okay.
We tend to, we try to have projects with multiple people on them so that we have the ability to kind of share code and work on code together. We peer review, particularly if it's going to be production code, that gets peer reviewed.
Right.
And that gets peer reviewed for kind of code quality as well as your kind of assumptions, and you basing this thing on sound logic and science. Right. It's a different kind of peer review, I guess, to academic, because we don't have like papers that we're publishing.
Share it publicly, yeah.
Yeah, we're not sharing it publicly, so it has a slightly different aspect. We want to make sure that this code works and it does what it's expected to do. Right. And of course, in a commercial environment, you've got testing, so everything gets tested multiple times. Integration testing, regression testing, and so on. So yeah, hopefully by the time the code actually hits the world, that it's gone through, is this sensible? Does it kind of do what we expect it to do? And does it break down? And should have gone through all those steps. We do some pair programming as well, which kind of, encourages kind of instant feedback and instant kind of resolutions to stuff. So that works quite well.
Brilliant. For product managers or product leads that are going to be working with data science teams for the first time, what are some of the ways of approaching a data science team to maximize the value from them that you'd recommend to product people, product managers? Yeah,
so again, lots have come from academia. Not all of them have, but there's definitely a kind of approach with data scientists to say they care really about the hypothesis they're trying to test, and they care about the underlying problem. So getting really clear on the problem you're trying to solve and what outcome that will have. I think that's the really critical thing with getting a good outcome with data scientists. So if I turn up with a product idea and I kind of, let's pick a random example. I want to optimize this chair I'm sitting on because it's really uncomfortable. How do I go and do that? I could either say, well, I think all chairs are bad and I need something completely different. Go and think me something up, data scientists. Go and optimize the whole world. Or I can say, actually, we're limited. We know we can alter the length of the legs and the cushion comfiness. Can you optimize for those two things? So the second one will have a much greater kind of ability for our data scientists to come do something, because they've got kind of boundaries. They know what you're trying to do. They know the outcome. They know the problem. The first one is a 5-year research project and a PhD, right? And then you're going to get some papers at the end of it and a nice thesis, but probably not in a commercial environment.
Yeah, so a strong hypothesis, set the constraints, try and give them some direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not just
we all need direction.
Wild and wacky ideas. And similarly, how would you suggest engineering functions who maybe data science is being introduced to the business? What would you recommend for engineers to build a relationship with data science teams?
Yeah, so this again is really I think it's still an ongoing discussion, probably out in the world, around kind of data engineers, data scientists, DevOps teams. It feels like it's critical to get all of those people in a project as early as possible together. So what I don't think works is if you start off with a data scientist and then we're going to throw some code over the fence to data engineers, and then can you go and implement this, please? Go and plug it in somewhere. And then that, turns into a DevOps process further down the line. It feels like actually to get a really good outcome, you want to get all those people into the project right from the beginning so they all understand the problem. And the data engineers can be just as involved in fixing that or, building the product as a data scientists. So in Centrica, we've got data engineering teams. They work in squads. We kind of use this kind of Spotify squad model that's been all the rage for a while. And we've called it different things, but essentially it's kind of matrix working. So we get all these people in together early on, build some rapport, build some kind of, actual understand the people that you're working with to some degree. That's, hugely important, because we're all people at the end of it. We're not just resources. And then the data engineers we're finding are contributing to how the problem gets solved. So it's, well, actually, we could go and do it here because this platform supports this particular thing, rather than, you're building all this in R and actually you've got this kind of Python pipeline here. So why don't you go and do it there? So actually getting them together, I think, really, really early on, and they're all technical people. They all, there doesn't tend to be, I think, as great a divide between data people as there does sometimes between data people and kind of commercial people. I think that's the thing that's probably the thing that will fall down, if anything does. Right.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for this session, Peter. It's been awesome to chat through.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
I've certainly learned plenty, and you're the first data scientist I've had on, and I know I could go through another 5 different topics with you. Yeah. So it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes from the Product Coalition European Tour, please remember that I'm spending this time to raise awareness and funds for the bushfire affected communities of Australia, as well as the wildlife and volunteer firefighters. You can show your support at bushfire.productcoalition.com. Until the next episode, thank you very much, Peter. And thank you all for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.